We are going to move quickly. My name is Will Reed. I head up the organization Technology for All, which some of you have heard about today. And we're glad to have here with us three persons who are involved in digital inclusion activities across the country. Andrea Taylor is with Microsoft. And Andrea and I have met prior to Microsoft, and it's good to have Andrea here. Stephanie Gagne, we just met yesterday, but we've talked on the phone. Actually, we met in person yesterday. We've talked on the phone. We met previously on the phone. Stephanie Gagne is the new managing director of the Community Technology Centers Network out of Washington, D.C., which is a membership organization of folks doing that kind of work across the country. Nicole Robinson, we've met in a previous life as well when she worked with the Technology Opportunity Institute, but now she is heading up the digital inclusion activities of our city. And really, I want to focus on two questions. I've got several questions on here, but I want to really focus on two to start with. And the first, I'll just put out there: why do we need to be concerned about digital inclusion?
Well, I'll start. First of all, I would like to acknowledge and thank Chris Bronk, Ambassador Derigian, and Rice University for really providing this platform for this dialogue, which is very important to our city's future locally and globally. And so why is digital inclusion necessary? Why is it so important to bridge our digital divide? It is a case really when it comes down to, in our perspective, of economics. When you look at the city of Houston from an education perspective, 1 out of 4 of our children is not graduating. When you look at it from a perspective of 30% of our adult population over 25 do not have a high school diploma. That equates to having populations who are unskilled, who cannot contribute to our workforce, and that becomes an issue for the city of Houston. And so I believe that Councilmember Noriega hit it well. Our mayor gets it. Our city council gets it. And I'm very proud of the fact that for the city of Houston and our business community and our nonprofit community, we get it. Because in order for Houston to achieve its educational goals, in order for Houston to achieve its workforce goals, in order to have the quality of life, we've got to make sure that we include these populations and address these issues.
My organization represents the foot soldiers that are serving the underserved communities. And what they're doing is they're attempting to utilize technology as a tool, not as an end in itself, but as a means for all the things that Nicole just mentioned. The community centers that I represent, they're all over the country, they're different sizes, and they're actually providing education, job training, social services, healthcare, daycare, and they use technology in order to put these populations or individuals to at least let them know what their options are. To me, it's a matter of being responsible, of promoting responsible empowerment.
Andrea?
Well, I don't think Microsoft needs any introduction. I hope it doesn't in this room and many others here in the state and around the world. But what I think I want to share with you in response to Will's question really has to do with the pillars that underlie the community affairs program that I'm a part of as the representative of the North America team, and our global efforts to address the needs for a global knowledge economy to have a labor force that is prepared to carry us forward. And we have 3 pillars. One is we're interested in promoting education for all individuals so that they can realize their potential. Second, we're interested in economic and community development, which we've heard a lot about here this afternoon. And third, we're interested in fostering innovation. And the fact of the matter is that where we stand now in the world, it requires that we we put our attention on giving everyone opportunities to gain the 21st century skills that are going to be required to maintain our leadership position and to continue to evolve and develop as communities. It's very interesting in listening to the last discussion to think about a company like Microsoft, which has created in a way a lot of the demand for new skills that we see in the world. And we think about it from in a pyramidal sense, and I'm sure some of you have heard this before, but I will just mention it here. At the company, we think about our business in this way. At the top of the pyramid, there are about 1 billion people around the world who are using technology on a daily basis to enhance their life and their work and their community activities. There are, in the middle, about 4 billion people who we see as the second billion as our next tier of customer targets. This is the group that we want to engage with and encourage them to use the technology as their capacity to do so comes on stream. Now, the first billion that are already customers are mostly in North America and in Europe and in Japan. And so there's a large part of the world where there is no touch or very limited touch. And then at the very bottom of the pyramid, which is where we do our work in community affairs in the program that I manage, there are about 1 billion people. And these are the people who are most underserved and who are really being left out and who we will all be disadvantaged if they are not able to participate in the workforce. And so it is that bottom of the pyramid group that we are targeting in the work that we do in our philanthropic efforts at Microsoft. We don't feel that without that intervention that I think Ms. Noriega was discussing, without a special outreach to those populations who have lacked economic and educational opportunities in so many other arenas, they will not come to this technology. Now, you could argue that it's very self-serving for a company like Microsoft to target that group. On the other hand, they're not ever going to get to be customers without some intervention. And I think what we would suggest in response to your question, Will, is that there has to be a targeted and concerted effort that will look a lot like public-private partnerships that we can talk about as we go forward to bring that group into the population, into the economic mainstream.
So kind of what I hear all of you talking about is creating opportunities for all that many of us take for granted. When I think about our household, we are 2 people and we have 4 computers in the house, 3 laptops and 1 desktop, and the house is wireless and connected to the internet through a broadband connection, and we enjoy that, and we do lots of things online. What you're talking about is creating those same opportunities and also helping people have the skills that they need to participate fully in the digital world that most of us enjoy. So how do we make this happen? We heard lots of conversation about who should be involved in funding these kinds of things. How do we make sure these things take place within are provided? Are all of our communities have the opportunity to take advantage of these opportunities?
Well, I'll tell you from my point of view in working with CTCs, it really has been a
Community Technology Centers.
Community
CTCs.
Technology Centers, I'm sorry. What we've been doing is it's really happening. Individuals are just stepping up to the plate. And it's really the difference that we've been seeing is grassroots efforts. A Community Technology Center organization in Seattle got together, rallied the grassroots community, and was able to get the state of Washington to allocate $500,000 to build capacity and support community technology centers to address the issues that we're addressing. So what it's going to take is a combined effort. And in addition to that, we've also been very fortunate, the community technology centers that I've been involved with, to have companies like Microsoft to give us grants, to help with capacity building, to educate our communities. A lot of things that we find is folks don't know what they don't know. They don't know what they're missing out of. And once again, once someone is self-empowered and at least there's a equal opportunity, not everyone's going to rise to the top, but to know that everyone at least had an opportunity to step up to the plate is what makes the difference. So it's really a collaborative effort. Every community is going to be a little different because it's going to depend on the community and the environment. But the most successful collaborations involved municipalities, communities, nonprofits, and businesses like Microsoft, and they've been very instrumental. In particular, AT&T helps us really identify communities that are left out. We received a grant from AT&T that we distributed to our community centers to allow accessibility to people with disabilities. Sometimes that was a big population that was just sort of left out. And what the grant allowed us to do, because of a big corporation, is to make our communities more accessible. And what we found is once we're available to even people with disabilities, they become of value to society. It's just they have never been given the opportunity to even step in the door. So that's been our experience.
I would just add to that Microsoft has as a global goal to reach 250 million people with IT skills training by 2015. And our strategies for doing that are all about partnership, which we've heard a great deal about here today. There is no single entity, I assure you, that can solve this problem alone. It's really a collective problem. It is a community problem, and it requires a collective solution. At Microsoft, the way that we address this, and I would just add that it is the primary issue that we support in our philanthropy. We are not the Gates Foundation, in case there is confusion about that. That's another organization that has a lot more resource, actually, than we do, and they're focused on a broader agenda. But what we have determined at Microsoft worldwide is that the one issue that we will focus on is training, and particularly providing IT skills training for individuals across the world, because as we move toward a new economy, this is a skill set that people most lack and most need in order to move forward. Even here in the U.S., there have been, for the last 10 years, probably 300,000 to 400,000 IT jobs that have gone unmet because we don't have the requisite skill set within the labor pool. We know as well that there is an aging population and baby boomers are retiring. The cohort behind the 75 million baby boomers who will retire is much smaller. It's about 44 million people, and those young people have fewer skills than those who are retiring. And so where are we going to fill the positions that are emerging in order to remain competitive? So we have set up a program where, in partnership with others, we will provide funding for training, for IT skills training in particular, and we have a curriculum package, two curriculum packages that we have developed. One is called Unlimited Potential, which is available in 22 languages, so it can be used here in this country where we have a large immigrant population as well as around the world. And then there is a digital literacy curriculum, which are free and available to any nonprofit to use to help train people, because again, as has been said, it's not enough that there is a computer access. It's really, I think, gone beyond access, at least in our experience, to the point that if people don't have specific training about how to use the tools of technology, and for more than just entertainment, which is fine, but it doesn't help you to get a job, it doesn't help you to keep a job and to be competitive. Without that training, it really is not useful. And there are many, many, many families and communities across this nation that are in that situation. So we focus our resources in order to work with other groups in partnership, like the Goodwill Industries, like Easter Seals, like Boys and Girls Club, the YWCA. Here in Houston, I'm very proud to say that Technology for All has been a recipient of support from Microsoft for a number of years. The Urban League locally receives support. So there are organizations that are already targeting, through their membership, training those who have been left out. And we then, in turn, provide funding and also software so that they can be trained on Vista as opposed to Windows 98, so that when they go into the marketplace, they have the requisite skills. But it's really a collective effort. I just want to share with you one statistic, and then I'll stop, in terms of training around IT skills, and where the resources are coming from and where we seem to be challenged. private philanthropy is currently spending about $1 billion a year on training for IT skills in particular, and helping people to be involved in this new economy, this knowledge economy based on technology. The government is spending anywhere from $2.5 billion to $5 billion. And private industry is spending about $100 billion annually training and retraining existing workforce in order to keep up with the changes that are occurring in technology. So when you think about that disparity, and you think about the people who are not in the workforce but need to transition, that is a huge challenge, and there isn't a single source that is going to respond to that problem. So it would be our position that through these partnerships we can help leverage and make available to those populations who are being left out the kind of training and the skills building that are needed to take them beyond entertainment, but really into an education environment. And it's a lot about retraining adults. Our program is for not for school, but it's after school and out of school programming, and for adults who are already working and who need to upgrade their skills. So it's a tremendous challenge. There's room for a lot more resource than is currently available, and I think the benefit to the entire community is without question.
Let me just tag on to that just a second. We are a Microsoft grantee, but we couldn't, with the gift that you gave us, we couldn't do what we are doing because we had to couple that with all these other resources. We had to couple it with the community organizations that are out there in the community that have credibility that our organization didn't have. We had to couple it with contributions from corporations in terms of computers that we placed in those organizations. We had to couple that with AmeriCorps Vista volunteers that are placed in those organizations. They're actually doing training and empowering volunteers, et cetera. So if we had with just the Microsoft support, we could not have done this, but it's putting all that together that made it possible.
That's
Nicole?
right. The vision for the City of Houston's Digital Inclusion Initiative, which is entitled We Can, Wireless Empowered Community Access Network, is about creating what we're calling a digital future for Houstonians. And we're doing that through focusing on dropout prevention and recovery, GED certification, and achievement of the city's educational and workforce and economic goals. And so through this effort, we have the ability or the potential to impact over 500,000 Houstonians. And so to accomplish this goal, given its ambitious scale and scope, we've got to involve all players coming from the education arena, coming from the business arena. As my colleagues here said, it's going to involve the community. And so we are not creating or planning this effort in a vacuum. We recognize the value of having the input of the community to be a part of this effort. And so we have established what we're calling neighborhood digital leadership teams. These are the teams that are representatives of the community organizations, of the businesses, of the residents that are in these communities, who can tell us firsthand, what the needs are, what the barriers are for those areas. We're also utilizing advisory committees for programs, subject matter experts from a technical perspective. We are establishing a digital inclusion task force. Councilmember Noriega mentioned the City Council Committee, Human Services and Technology Access. That committee is in place to help be of support to this effort, and their first role is to help identify the persons who will serve on that task force. And so through this effort, it has to be a comprehensive effort. It has to be a concerted effort. And we're proud of the fact that Microsoft is one of our partners who joined in this effort. We're proud of the fact that we have HP, Verizon, and there are many other partners that have stepped up to say that we understand and recognize the significance of what we're trying to do through this initiative and understand the importance and want to be involved. And again, in order for us to be successful, there is no other way, and we recognize that.
Stephanie and Andrea, you are out there across the country. I'm curious if you've seen any new and unusual models for digital inclusion.
Oh, I'm so glad you asked that question. I spend a lot of my time as the Director of North America Community Affairs for Microsoft on the road, visiting sites and trying to understand where innovation is occurring and to help scale up and sustain programs that are working. And we have about 400 partners now across the country since we started our initiative in 2003. And so I've seen a fair number of working programs. And one of them that I visited just about 2 weeks ago was in Miami, Florida, where the city of Miami, recognizing the challenge that it has and the disparity that that exists there between particularly immigrant populations that are coming in and the lack of skills for a community that is growing at a very fast pace. And there are probably even more cranes in Miami than there are here in Houston with all the development and growth that's going on. And so the city there and the mayor in particular, again, it's a city-based project, determined that one of the best ways to reach out and provide training to people would be to use the park system. They have a very elaborate park system in Miami, about 140 parks throughout the city, which really serve as a kind of a relief valve for the fact that many underserved communities are living 3 or 4 generations in 1 or 2 bedroom apartments. And so in order for people to just survive, they have to go outside for recreation and for space and for, you know, places that they can just relax and enjoy. And the parks have become a kind of extended living room. So they determined that they would implement a training program through the park system and provide IT skills centers, community technology centers in the parks facilities that are very accessible to people. So no one has to travel more than a mile or 2 to get to training. And they would use those facilities on a really round-the-clock basis. So during the day, there are seniors there. In the after-school hours, there are young people there coming from school. In the evening, there are adults and parents who want to receive training so that they can upgrade their skills and get better employment. And so they're offering this training program through the parks, and they're about to roll out 40 centers in the among the 140 parks in the city. And it's a project called Elevate Miami, and when I visited, they were just getting ready to open. They're going to open the first one, I think, next week. And literally, I went to 3 of the centers, and they have waiting lists already. People are eager to come in and get the training. They recognize that this is an opportunity. They appreciate the fact that they don't have to go very far, and they see this as a pathway toward achieving greater economic self-sufficiency. They said that even though they haven't started, the city of Miami has already been besieged with calls from other parts of Florida who now want to know why their city is not doing the same thing. And it's almost become an entitlement, and the program hasn't even begun. There's a similar program in Riverside, California. But I think what we're seeing is that cities, as well as states and even at the federal level, a recognition that, again, we need to come up with innovative solutions, particularly for adults who need to be retrained. And this is a significant issue. So many communities have displaced workers, where even here in Houston, that was one of the things that attracted us to the most recent grant with Technology for All. You had 150 people moving into Houston from the Gulf Coast. How many?
150,000.
What did I say, 150?
150.
I'm sorry. I meant 150,000. I had a long overnight flight from Seattle. Forgive me. 150,000 people move into this community who didn't have skills and opportunity where they came from. And now they're here. This is a growing, vibrant community. There are opportunities here for many of those individuals, but they lack the skills. They do not have the requisite skills. How do you bridge that gap? So it's a long-winded answer to your question, but I think that there are examples, and we need to be very open to innovation that may come in ways that we hadn't thought about before. But if you're going to really retrain and retool, particularly adults and young adults who have been disaffected for whatever reason, you need to come up with new solutions. The old way has not worked, clearly. So I think there are great opportunities for creativity and for partnership.
Yeah, it's clear to me here in Houston that that people are hungry to gain those skills, gain those knowledge. Many of the centers are just like you talk. There people are waiting in line to use the computers, waiting in line for classes, et cetera. So, Stephanie, did you have?
I do. I have a real quick one. In Washington, D.C. area, there's a community center called the Latin American Community Center, and how they are being innovative, and maybe it's really going back to basics. They're having individuals become mentors to community. There's a huge Latin American urban population that are just underskilled, and they're asking individuals to become mentors, and they mentor one individual. In one particular case, it was a young lady who lived in a house with 3 generations. She was being abused by family members and joined a gang, and they kept asking her to please come to the community center. Finally, she gave in. They addressed her personal social issues she was dealing with and started her with some training in technology. It gave her such self-esteem and such an opportunity to gain a skill that it really empowered her. She was able to get a job, help her family get out of the circumstances that she was involved in, and in turn, she is now a mentor, and has even helped eliminate or at least recruit individuals out of the local female gangs that were being formed in the area. So it was just a matter of helping one person at a time, and then that just keeps multiplying. So those were real cases, and people said, and her particular testimony was, if someone hadn't dealt with my first basic needs and then showed me the other opportunities that were available, then I don't know where I'd be today, or she wouldn't even be making a difference in her community.
And, I just want to speak to, I think Andrea said it, about the importance of having an open mind as part of this process, the importance of looking at best practices. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel. It doesn't work. It doesn't make sense. We want to capitalize and maximize the dollars that we have as best as possible. And when we talk about models, you heard earlier the statistic about if you go to any of the libraries, the 36 libraries that are located here, especially if you go between the period of 4 and 6 o'clock p.m., the wait could be as long as 2.5 hours. And that's for the folks we know who actually wait and sign in.
That's true in the community organizations as well.
And that's true in the community organizations as well. So where I'm going is that through the City of Houston's effort, we're not only focusing on city facilities like libraries, but we're expanding that to include multi-service centers. We're expanding that to include parks, community centers, and then going beyond. I think Jerome mentioned it, Crowder as part of his presentation, and Ed Knightley mentioned it as part of his, the importance of going to where you feel most comfortable, where there are services in place to be of resource and support, and that's our community-based organizations who've been doing this for years. This is not new for the City of Houston as it relates to bridging the digital divide, and so we are going to partner with those organizations and allow them to be that network for us and build the capacity for them. So when you talk about residents being able to access technology, going a block or two from their home, and they can go into these community-based organizations, or they can go into the schools or city facilities. Those are a part of our efforts and a part of our strategy here in the City of Houston. We really want to maximize the opportunities that are being provided, the significant gains that are being made through our community organizations now. We want to empower them, and we see a weekend as an opportunity for the city to really be a catalyst for change, and to really not reinvent the wheel, but to empower those organizations who are already in this business and are doing a great job.
Could I just interject one thought here about policy, as we just heard discussed by the previous panel? One of the things that now our program, which is in its 5th year, has come to be very much a priority for us, even though we've invested in these 400 programs across the entire United States and Canada, and my colleagues in other parts of the world are making similar investments. We've come to the conclusion very quickly that policy engagement is also a part of the strategy that has to go along with any desire to eliminate digital exclusion. In order to bring people in, that you really have to look at the underlying policies at both the state and local level as well as the federal level. And one of the things that a corporate partner particularly can do when we're working with other industry leaders to figure out the appropriate role that we can play, but we have a network already with policymakers in Washington and in states and cities across the country. And we don't have the constraints that a 501c3 organization has about public education and advocacy. And so there's another opportunity, I think, that is just beginning to be understood and utilized, where there can be, through partnership with nonprofits, with community-based organizations, and with corporations that have an ongoing dialogue with policymakers to help bring forward the needs in this area. We have in this country, for example, around workforce, the Workforce Investment Act, which has not been reauthorized for some number of years, and it's not likely to be reauthorized this year. Hopefully, when the next president, whoever he or she may be, will want to take this up. And so we're working this year to really go across the country and have a dialogue with communities about this issue and begin to have a discussion and a perspective on what kind of policies would you offer new administration in terms of how you would address this. And I think this is a really important issue. And we don't have, again, no one has all the answers, but what corporations can do is provide a vehicle and a voice. We get our strength, however, from the examples that come from communities that are working creatively with best practices to solve these problems. But I just want to underscore the importance of policy and the importance of educating the public to why this is an important issue and why we should all care, because that's not universally understood at this point in time. People don't really realize how directly it affects the abilities of communities to be economically stable and to innovate and to grow.
Business and industry needs an educated workforce. That makes sense to business people. We're going to take a couple of questions. You have a question?
Yes, and a comment, because I wanted to echo when I was outside speaking briefly with Councilwoman Noriega. This may also, as a consequence, help curb what some have called the gentrification and transitioning of neighborhoods in the past, where they languish, they're considered a bad neighborhood, but then when condos go up and more affluent people move into those same neighborhoods, then you see infrastructure increasing. You see the streets paved properly. You see the ditches cleaned properly. You see street lights and all of these things that you're talking about that builds neighborhood pride, and people stay in the neighborhood. When grandma dies, you stay in the shotgun house and you fix it up, and it has all of these resources that you're talking.
So what you're saying, if people have the skills, they can earn more money. If they earn more money, they can stay and help improve the neighborhood that they're proud of. Is that what you're saying?
Economic prosperity to their neighborhood, where they don't have to maybe ride 2 hours on the bus to go outside of their neighborhood to find the jobs. They will come to them because of the aspects you all are talking about. That normally it happens the other way, that the neighbors transition, they gentrify, and the neighborhood is very upset about that. And I see this as a long-term vision also, that will help people, like I said, stay in their neighborhood, that will bring economic prosperity and pride. They will no longer be called a bad neighborhood that no one wants to be around. And I think that is an honorable goal to have also.
Janice Anderson, did you have a question?
Yes, I did. Nicole mentioned the benefit of being able to go a couple of blocks away and have training or mentorship associated with technology skills. But we've also heard a lot about excess capacity today. And in corporate America, there's a huge capacity involved around training facilities that may be used between 7:30 a.m. and 5:30 p.m., but are not used in the evenings and on weekends. Have you seen any partnerships between large companies with those training facilities to make them available in the off hours for the kinds of training that we're talking about today.
Those are the kinds of conversations that we are having. The WorkSource is one of our partners. They have 36 centers around. We are looking at HCC, educational university campuses, making their labs available when students are not using them. So just what you mentioned, and it speaks back to the point that in order for us to be successful, we've got to have everyone coming to the table, and everyone plays a role in this. Everyone, and there's opportunity for everyone to be engaged as well. So
Question here.
Technical question more than anything else. I do a lot of work with multiple countries and multiple organizations that are trying to do what you're talking about, getting people into the digital age. And one of the biggest troubles that we run into is that people like to do the digital age, go out and they're going to buy the computer. Unfortunately, within the United States, a lot of the computers that are given to them are ones that are turned down by corporations, being the older machines, the 900 and 600 megahertz machines. They go to a pawn shop and buy a 900 and 600 megahertz machine. They go to the flea market and buy a 900 and 600 megahertz machine. The average speed of the machine in the Middle East and locations like that is a 300 megahertz machine. The problem is, once they get those machines home and give them to the kids and start using them, they can't even get the software to run on them anymore, because even from Microsoft, I cannot find a 900 megahertz version of their latest software or a 600 megahertz version. All the newer software is available in any big box store that these kids go buy you from. You've got to have a 1.3 or 1.6 machine. So then it becomes a rock in the house that they don't use, except for the limited software that's in there. Commercial-wise, they can't get it. What I end up doing is I go scrounging used software stores just to buy the software to give the people so they can use the machines and take them home.
And that's one of the things that our community technology centers address, because they do have the facility. One person can manage the entire facility for them. They don't have to worry about viruses. And working with communities and organizations, they're able to get donations and opportunities to keep everything at least as up to date or more up to date than individuals could do at their own homes. So that's why centers and libraries are important, because sometimes it's hard to manage that independently in a family environment where it's easier economy of scales to manage everything under one roof.
And I agree with you 100%, but there's a lot of families where they all got to be there. The only time they got is there. Mom can't go down here because the kid's here. So they try to do this. They go to the pawn shop and buy the machine. But then they find out later on that it's useless, because all the software they can get to teach their kids won't run on their machines.
One of the things that I know many organizations, and ours is involved in this too, are involved in is computer refurbishing, but taking more recent computer donations from major corporations. We just got a large donation from a corporation, 2,000 computers or so. And as a Microsoft authorized refurbisher, we're putting Windows XP on those machines, which are Pentium 4 machines, and redeploying those back into the same neighborhood that you heard people talk about the wireless network. So, you're exactly right, but there are solutions out there to provide a higher class machine and also help people gain the skills that they need to take care of that machine when it goes into their home. We do a Learn and Earn program, and our best Learn and Earn teacher is sitting up there on the top row next to Brian Anderson, they learn how to take care of their community, learn how to take care of the computer, do some community service, then they earn the computer and take it home.
And the question would be, can I get a computer that somebody bought at a pawn shop and have them bring it to you, and you can refurbish it so they can use the software available? That's the issue. It's a major issue.
Well, we don't encourage people to buy computers at pawn shops, to be honest with you. So, I think.
Part of educating.
Yep.
The community.
Community organizations do have a big role in terms of education. We'll take one last question from Rick number 1.
Has Technology for All measured the impact on the community of the project that you've got?
We would like to. We've done a little bit of that as best we can. Our primary focus is to be about our mission. But we did recently go after a grant that was turned down to actually do a better job of measuring all of that, so that we can say to our funders, this is what we're doing, and these are the metrics, and this is what has been accomplished. But we did not get that grant.
That. We heard some horrific statistics here. I think it was 30% of the adults over 25 without, you'd say, a high school education.
In the neighborhood where our office is, Rick, in the neighborhood where our office is, 34% of the adults are all that have a high school diploma.
And over the long term, it would really be nice to know what impact this has on those kinds of statistics, so that we can sell the idea.
And organizations like these represented at the table need to figure out a way to measure those things more effectively so we can answer questions from people like you, so that we know we're doing a good job.
Just one comment on that. We are very concerned, obviously, about metrics. If you set up a goal that you're going to reach 250 million people by a year certain, then how are you measuring that? So we're spending a fair amount of time working in partnership with the University of Washington in Seattle to set up a process of measuring the effectiveness, not just the touch, not just that someone had access to or exposure to a computer, but what were they able to accomplish as a result of it. And some of the programs that we've supported have fairly detailed information about this. And one of the things that they have discovered, for example, is that you need a high school education as a minimum. You don't necessarily need a 4-year college degree, although that's a desirable goal. But if you're trying to move someone from below poverty to above the poverty level, if they can get the high school education, the better training programs require that as a minimum. And then most employers want that as a minimum. And once people get the combination of a high school diploma or a GED plus training, that is a concentrated training program that if they meet all the requirements and participate, they will get a job, then the data is already showing that their income goes up exponentially to the point that it puts them over the poverty line. So there are metrics that are beginning to evolve, and it's about really getting people to a W-2 or to self-employment, because that's the goal. It's not just to give them the experience and the exposure, sending a few emails and playing a few games. It's really, can you get people to the point of employability? And then once they're in that pipeline, there are a lot of other opportunities that will be available to them. And if they're employed, as I mentioned, employers are spending $100 billion a year to keep their employees trained and to refresh, because the technology is constantly changing. You've got to constantly update the skills.
I want to close with one example and lift up Nicole. Nicole, in another life, ran this organization called the Technology Opportunity Institute and worked with our organization to do training with our organization. And actually, one of our best employees is a person that went through one of her programs and is on our staff, and we could not do without her. But she gained those skills, and she's one of our most valuable employees. And she's making significantly more money than she was making back then working as a retail person, a sales clerk. So, thank you.
Okay, if we can get Julie Hedlund's program up. I'll start the introduction. We're at speed round here. Remember, after we wrap this up, we will be reconvening over in Duncan Hall, across campus for a refreshment hour. For those who've made it through, you deserve refreshments. We do light to medium refreshment here, but nothing of the extreme variety. Julie Hedlund is here with us. I called Julie's boss back last year, and I said, I found out about the Information Technology and Innovation Foundation, because when you work in Washington, you can get a free lunch any day of the week if you'll go listen to someone speak. Julie came up because I liked her boss's message, and we talked about, I said, will you come here? And he said, no, I'm busy that day. I said, okay, well, what can you do? He said, I'll send, I explained what the conference was, and he said, well, Julie knows this topic better than I do. And I said, okay, done, we'll take her. We had a chance to catch up last night. The Information Technology and Innovation Foundation produces some really excellent reporting on what IT does to the bottom line of the U.S. economy. She's going to talk about that. Julie Hedlund, lobbyist was raised in a rather negative term today. I think Julie will admit that will you admit? Yeah, she was a lobbyist. Oh. I have friends who are lobbyists. If you live in Washington, they're your neighbors. They might, know your kids. She is a co-author of the paper, the report, The Rise of the New Mercantilists, Unfair Trade Practices in the Innovation Economy. The ITIF reports Patents Pending, Patent Reform in the Innovation Economy. Before ITIF, she was running her own consulting firm. She was an advisor to the Global IP, Internet Protocol Alliance, and she was a director for international policy at Nortel Networks. And she is a graduate of Georgetown University and St. Olaf's College in Minnesota. So without any more delay, and following Julie, we'll have some concluding remarks by Paul Hobby, and then we'll move on to the reception.
Thank you very much, Chris, and thank you all for inviting me to join you today. It's been a very, very interesting and I found rewarding day. I've had a chance to speak to a lot of you, and the beauty of being at the end of the program is that many of you have made a lot of the points that I was going to make, and that means that my program can be considerably shortened, and that all of us can soon get off to those refreshments that Chris mentioned. So anyway, I just want to say that I think we can pretty much all agree that connectivity is a key factor in economic prosperity, the health, and the well-being of our communities. It's really become sort of a mother and apple pie kind of issue now here in the United States. I mean, nobody says they don't want more connectivity. I mean, nobody says, well, gosh, I don't really think we need more broadband. I think we have plenty of it right now, at least not that I've heard. There has been some disagreement, though, as to where the U.S. is in connectivity. Where are we right now in our level of broadband penetration? And I'd like to just briefly discuss a little bit about that. We created the internet, so you would hope that we are a leader in broadband. And once upon a time, and we were up there. In 2001, when the OECD first started keeping track of broadband penetration, we were number 4. We were up there with the broadband leaders. That's really not the case anymore. Now there are multiple arguments over what rankings are the best to give us an idea of global broadband penetration. And I'm not going to get into it here because we don't have a lot of time, but I have materials I can send you that refute a lot of the arguments against using the OECD statistics. We have found at ITIF, and we've done extensive research on this, that they are still the most accurate statistics that we have to tell us where countries are in broadband penetration. And if you look, our U.S. ranking is going down. It's not good right now, and so far it's not getting any better. And just to look a little bit more closely at some of the criticisms of these statistics, and like I said, I won't go in these too much, but a lot of people say, well, OECD excludes some data. We lead in the number of broadband subscribers. We rank more favorably on internet users. We're less urban, and some of these things have some grains of truth to them, but they don't really stand up to close scrutiny. For instance, yes, we have more internet users than many of the countries that are at top of the broadband statistics. But if you follow out this argument, one of the leaders is Iceland. Now, I'm not going to go into why Iceland's up there because there are a lot of some very special reasons having to do with that country as to why it is where it is. But even if every single person in Iceland had internet access, I mean, they would still be behind the United States, of course, just in sheer numbers of internet subscribers. Another point is, so these are, sorry, I didn't skip ahead, but the other points that they make in addition to internet users is that the U.S. is a less urban country. We have a lot of rural areas. We have a lot of population living in rural areas. And also that looking at broadband per capita is the wrong measure. All right, well, let's look at broadband per capita first. We at ITIF agree that there are some problems with using broadband penetration per capita as a statistic to measure broadband penetration. So we looked at broadband access, subscribership by household. If you do look at that measurement, the U.S., as you can see here, comes up at 10th instead of 15th. That's good. That's better. I think we can all agree. I'm not sure that we would agree that that's exactly where we want to be. We want to be a world leader. Is 10th where we want to be? We are at the top of the world in so many other economic measurements. 10, I'm not sure, is really where we want to be. Okay, let's look at another one of the concerns about measuring broadband penetration in the United States, and that is penetration versus urbanicity. And, people argue that, well, we have a lot of rural areas, and, certainly if you look at Seoul, Korea, oh yeah, it's very, very urban there, so they have very high broadband penetration. That is true. And if you say, well, look at people who live in, say, rural Texas, you really just can't compare the United States to these other countries. But you can actually, because if you look at the percent of urban population, the urbanicity, our urbanicity is actually pretty close to some countries that have higher broadband penetration. We're really not that far off in urbanicity, say, from Canada. Canada has a higher penetration than we have. We're not even that far down in urbanicity from the Netherlands. The Netherlands is number 3 if you look at household penetration. So we're yes, there are some aspects to urbanicity that do make it easier to roll out broadband. That's absolutely true, and I won't deny that. But I think that one of the ways we can address some of these concerns about measurement is let's just not look at broadband penetration, but let's look at broadband speed and broadband price. If you look at broadband speed, price, and penetration, and this is a calculation that we have done at the ITIF using a number of different statistics, we're still at number 15. So even if you look at all the various measurements of broadband, penetration, speed, and price, we are still falling behind from where we want to be. Okay, now what can we say about policy? I mean, what should we do about this? I mean, for instance, there was a lot said today about the importance of getting connectivity out to rural areas, to low-income areas, and what that connectivity should be. Should it be the same as urban connectivity? Should it be, at a different level? Is plain old dial-up okay? You have a phone line, you have dial-up. Is dial-up broadband? I think that one of the things we need to think about, and I got this. One of the things we need to think about is the trade-offs involved in policy making with respect to broadband and connectivity. If we want to get broadband everywhere, and we want equal levels of broadband for urban and rural, what are some of the issues we have to address? And one of those issues is expense. I mean, there's just no denying it. It is more expensive to roll out urban-grade broadband access to rural areas. If you're talking about having the same connectivity, if you're just talking about dial-up, that's different. But I would argue that dial-up internet is not broadband. Broadband, and that's a very good question. Just this week, the FCC, Yes, 15 days ago, the FCC revised its definition of broadband. They had 6 tiers, now they have 7. It's better because we think it's kind of along the lines of what we recommended. It used to be that it's basically 200 kilobits per second was broadband. I mean, come on. I mean, I don't know about you, but have you tried to do anything online using 200 kilobits per second? No. So, and then it didn't go anywhere near high enough in definition. I mean, now it's like 100 plus. I mean, there are countries, Korea, people like 100 megabits per second. It was like, oh yeah, we get this all the time. What do you have? So the FCC revised and sort of further made a little bit more accurate and more granulated its definition of broadband. And I don't have each of the tiers here, but you can find them online. And also, more importantly, and this is what I'm getting at here with this slide, is that the FCC right now doesn't do a very good job of getting information as to, how much broadband there is out in the country. There are a number of reasons for that, and some of it has to do with the kind of information they're asking the service providers to disclose and some confidentiality issues about that. But even with the information that the FCC collects right now, we are seeing that the gap is narrowing in the number of broadband subscribers by density, if you're looking at higher density zip codes versus lower density zip codes. So we're seeing that the gap is shrinking over time. But if we look at the next chart, we're still looking at disparities, and even some of these disparities between, between rural, suburban, and urban locations. And this is looking at this is number of providers in rural, suburban, and urban locations. So if you look 0 providers, you're still looking at many rural areas that have no providers at all, no broadband providers, and I don't count dial-up as a broadband provider. And then if you go down the line, though, you will notice that, and it's a little hard to tell without color, but there are many rural locations that have at least one provider. All right, that's not competitive, but it's better than nothing. And some that have 2, and so on. Of course, if you look at suburban and urban areas, you're going to see many more providers. What are some of the ways that we can address this disparity? And instead of talking just about, say, I'm not going to talk about policy right at this moment. We'll talk just a little bit further on. But one of the best ways to get better connectivity to rural areas is through business broadband. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about how important it is for businesses to have access to broadband in communities. But I think it's fairly obvious to all of you here and from what we've heard today that when broadband is rolled out to businesses in a rural community, there are spillover effects to the residential people that that live in that community. They work at those offices that have broadband, and they say, why don't I have the speed at home? And they go home and they say, well, I've got to do something about this, and maybe I'll go to my congressman and congresswoman and say, I need to get some change here, or maybe they call their cable company and say, well, why can't I get broadband access, whatever. But it's a start, and also obviously. If there's, urban grade, broadband, for businesses in a rural community, then, and I'll talk a little bit more about this, then, once the broadband's there, more businesses are going to want to, move into those communities. One government policy that already exists that, has been somewhat effective so far in getting more broadband into rural areas and urban grade broadband is the Rural Utility Service Loan. These are loans and grants that provide tax incentives for rural build out. We actually take that a little bit further at ITIF. We've made a recommendation that program should be changed somewhat to allow what we call reverse auctions. And this would be that companies would bid to get subsidized support to provide broadband in a rural area. But the company that would have the winning bid would be the one that basically could offer the most efficient, lowest cost service. That is the company that would need the least subsidy to operate in a rural area. So you wouldn't just have a company saying, oh, well, I can provide a really great service, give me a bunch of money. You would have a company that would really have to prove that it can provide the most efficient service. That way your tax dollars, your loan program is going to go further. And if you want more information on that, I can certainly give it to you. And just one more thing on broadband in rural areas, and this is a lot of what we talked about today. Again, if we look at broadband by community type, rural, urban, and suburban, rural areas are still falling behind, but as you can see, there is improvement. There is improvement over time, and Before again we go into some of the policy recommendations, one thing I want to address is something that people have raised today, and particularly in some of the latter sessions this afternoon, and that is, if we provided high-speed broadband to every community, rural, urban, everywhere, would everyone subscribe? Let's say it's just there. And let's say it's even not all that, I mean, you know, it's there, maybe it's cost, we have to talk about cost, but what are the factors that keep people from subscribing? Because, and I think training is a key here that people have talked about. I mean, simply making it available is not enough. And what I'm trying to get at is that there's sort of two aspects to policy. There's the supply side, where you provide incentives for providers to roll out broadband. There is the demand side that you address, where you say, for people say, I have to have this, I must have this. I mean, children are a great factor here. You know, they come home from school and they say, Mom, Dad, there's this great thing, I need to do it, it's a game or it's this, and, you know, and why don't we have a computer, and why can't I do this? I mean, think about it. Even at the very basic fact, you have to have a computer. And I'm not going to get into this too much because it's been covered so very well here, but 32% of adults in the United States do not use the internet because most of them don't own a computer. I mean, very basic thing. And cost, obviously, is you know, a part of that. Just 30% of households in the United States with incomes less than $30,000 per year have broadband, compared with 76% of those whose incomes are $75,000 or more. And studies have shown that lack of computer ownership, lack of digital literacy, those are two of the key factors that limit broadband take-up. And so my point is that when we're looking at policies that simply subsidize broadband supply are probably not going to be enough to basically to get people to subscribe to broadband. And you know, so in the immediate term, I think that, and again, getting back to what a lot of people have said here today, we need a combined strategy for expanding broadband access. We need to support corporate efforts. We need to support government efforts, federal and local, very important, and nonprofit efforts as well. And there are a number of ways Congress could do this, but one might be to fund competitive community-based broadband access grant programs that, you know, focus on not only just broadband connectivity, the supply side, but also on digital literacy as well. And just one point I want to get back to, and that is, where is the broadband? Where do we have it and where don't we? We already know we're falling behind. I mentioned the FCC's you know, current reporting efforts. They've revised the reporting. They're going to be more specific, focusing more on what kind of access, how many providers people have per zip code, but speed and some of these other features that are important. But I think we're missing one important way that we could gather some I think, very useful information. And that is by asking people. Even if you don't have a computer, if you got online at a library, if there was a wiki type, you know, or web type service that could say, well, put in your address, where you live, and we'll tell you who your broadband service provider is. We'll tell you whether or not your neighbor is getting broadband. We'll tell you how much it costs. Other countries have this. I mean, the Swedish government has a program where you can go in and find out all these things quickly and easily so that you can say, well, gosh, I see my neighbor down the street has cheaper broadband access. Maybe I ought to have that. And this is, Virginia Tech has an e-corridor broadband access map. You can find this online on e-corridors. And it's very much what I'm mentioning here. You know, it's just, you just take the Google Maps type of function. It's a very simple software, very inexpensive. FCC could do it. We've talked to the FCC about it. They're interested in it. NTIA could do it just as a quick portal that people could go into and get some information, and they could plug in information as to what they have, and the government could use that to complement its reporting. And then, as I'm running out of time, and again, I've got this information in a paper in much greater detail, so and I'll be happy to pass that on to you. But one of the arguments against policy, broadband policy, a national policy, is that broadband is just like an iPod. It's just a consumer item. You know, it's fun. You play games on it, and so why do we need a policy for this? The difference is that broadband has what economists call externalities. It's like when people started getting telephones. A network externality is that when my neighbor gets a phone and my mother gets a phone and my brother gets a phone, I want a phone. The more people who have phones, the more people get phones. That is a network externality. The more people who have broadband, the more people want it, and it's a benefit. I mean, it's got some definite benefits. And just to point out here, and the interesting thing about externalities is that externalities are something that they're good, and the market does a pretty good job of providing services that have, and products that have externalities. If you just, and I'm not going to get into this because it's complicated, but the smaller box on the bottom is the amount of, quantity and, the equilibrium that the market would provide with broadband. If we did nothing at all and we had no broadband policies, you'd still get a certain sort of equilibrium of broadband access. And it's what what people who don't want policy would say, that's the right amount of broadband for us. If you look at the bigger box and you have government policies that encourage more broadband, then you basically encourage the spillover effects of broadband externalities, then you get the bigger box, which addresses social demand, which basically means you get more benefits for more people. And just very briefly, oops, now I've done it. Well, I'm not going to get into those right now because I've already run out of time, but there are various types of externalities, and essentially there are competitive externalities that the more access to broadband we have, the more competitive our companies are, and the more productive they are. If people have access to education over broadband, online education, then more of our workforce can become more productive. They get better jobs. It's much what the previous panel just spoke to. And those would be competitive externalities, as well as what we call prosumer externalities, meaning that we become both consumers of products, but we also produce. So we're much more productive individuals. If I can complete a form online, I'm much more productive than if I have to go to someone's office and have someone else do it for me. And then I think most importantly for the discussion we've had here today with respect to communities is broadband has regional externalities. And as I mentioned before, that means that if a community has broadband access, it's more likely to attract business. The more businesses that move into that community, the more jobs you have for people, and also the more exposure you have for people to be able to use broadband and want it in their homes. And now just very briefly on policy. ITF we don't have specific legislation that we promote, but what we're trying to point out here is that there are a number of goals, policy goals, and not all these goals with respect to broadband can be achieved equally, and some of them may actually conflict with each other. And my point here's an example. Let's say you want urban grade broadband to a rural area, and you want multiple competing broadband providers. So in a small town, you are the government and you subsidize 2 broadband providers, to a home, out in a rural area. Well, you get competition, and that's good. Prices may be lower, and so that if your goal is to have a lower priced broadband service, you've met that. If your goal is to provide choices, you've met that. But the problem is that you've had to subsidize 2 providers. You've had to because they're not going to go, they don't have a business case to go out into a rural area. You've had to pay for both of them to build out separate pipes to that town. That's very expensive. So if you're trying to keep your subsidies down, your costs down, you haven't been able to meet that goal. I'm not saying that one is necessarily better than the other, but I think that as policymakers, we need to look at what we're calling a matrix. There are policies on the demand side and on the supply side. They're proactive policies and policies that remove barriers. We have to, policymakers are going to look at what their goals are, and, politics being what it is, are probably going to come up with sort of a balanced approach. At least, we would hope. But what we recommend are policies that address both demand side and supply side. So, incentives for people to do telework, telemedicine, e-learning, e-government, digital literacy programs, extremely important, and universal service funding for broadband. And then removing barriers. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, change your franchising laws so you can have more broadband providers if that's something that's working in your state. It clearly seems to have worked here in Texas. Keep the internet tax moratorium on if it makes it cheaper for people to, for internet service providers to operate. Other taxes that, may bring down some of the barriers to providing broadband access. Supply side could be tax incentives, a next generation type of R&D credit, rural broadband funding, state programs, and then removing barriers, again, more spectrum, and I think the FCC's recent spectrum auction is certainly a step in the right direction. Broadband mapping, which is collecting better data, and just removing regulatory barriers. So those are some of the various approaches. You can pick and choose specific policies from those areas. I don't know if we want to take time for any questions or not.
Why don't we do questions in the...
Hey, that's a great idea. We can do questions and cocktails. I think that sounds great. And maybe by that time you'll forget what you were going to ask. No, never mind. Thank you very much.
So we'll have some closing remarks now from Paul Hobby, and I just want everyone to make note of the young lady in the corner, Kirsten Jones, who just got her fellowship to go study Hindi? In India today from the State Department. So I can still write a fairly decent recommendation letter to the State Department in State Department lingo to get someone a good gig there for the summer. I've already advised her to begin her prophylaxis for the various diseases she needs now. So Kirsten will be guiding you over to the engineering building, Duncan Hall, and I will be following along in the van. Okay, Paul Hobby has come in this afternoon. He agreed to come and give some comments to us for us this afternoon. Very brief introduction for him because once again we are standing in front of cocktails, except for Kirsten, who hasn't turned 21 yet. So keep an eye on her until I show up. Okay. From his bio, Mr. Hobby is currently the CEO of Alpheus Communications Incorporated, a Texas data center operator and wholesale telecommunications provider. So we've been talking a lot about pipes. I think he's the pipe guy. Until February 2006, he served as chairman of Caprock Services, and I used, when I was at the State Department and we needed to figure out how to get internet connectivity to places like Bangui, we'd call Caprock and say, how do we get a pipe? And they'd say, there are no pipes, we've got a satellite. And that was really where the costs started going crazy and the bandwidth goes down. So I learned a lot about extraterrestrial communications then. In 2005, Mayor Bill White appointed Hobby to serve on the board of the Greater Harris County 9/11 Emergency Network. Serves on multiple boards. He has had a long and illustrious career. He is also an attorney. We've had several attorneys come here. He's a graduate of the University of Virginia, the finest public school in the Commonwealth, according to everyone who went to the UVA. The William and Mary folks, they still, they try. But anyway, I'm getting punchy at the end of the day. Any rate, we're very pleased to have Mr. Hobby here to give us some of his perspective. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Christopher. Thank you. And I do realize what a precarious position I'm in. The end of the day, between you and the cocktails. So we will rip through this. We'll try and keep it lively. We'll keep it fun. Shout out whenever you want to. It's not like we've got such a throng here. As you have heard, I come at this from a very commercial perspective. You know, I've done a lot of telecom investing. I've managed telecom companies to good effect, I hope, on both fronts. I have spent a lot of time in the halls of the PUC and the halls of the FCC. And so, you know, the only thing I bring to this is not gray matter. You know, I can't work at a think tank or a university or anything like that. But there is this thing called risk that focuses the mind. So I can try and strip this down to you, for you and make some policy points. Again, it would, I'm sure you've spent all day with sumptuous fare about what's possible in telemedicine and entertainment and commerce and homeland security and, you know, the promises of broadband. And again, as a pure wholesaler of bandwidth, I'm for all that. You know, to work at Alpheus, you have to have a tattoo on your right cheek that says bandwidth is good, and on your left cheek it has to say compression is bad. So we're anti-MPEG, we're anti any compression algorithm. None of that is true, of course. But the one cliche from the dot-com era that came true is what? It's that bandwidth creates its own demand, you know, even at a constant price. And again, I need a spiffy PowerPoint that shows you price and time and all that stuff. And I'm going to pick on Julie. Now, yours didn't say price, it said expenditure. See, if you were think tank, price, business. Think tank is expenditure, a business guy would be price, money, dollars. I'm just picking on Julie because she's from Washington. She can take it. But my career has really all been about media, and it's about telecom, and it's about software, you know, try and steer away from devices and hardware and things like that. So I'm a network-centric sort of guy. You know, atom-based networks sometimes. Digital-based networks preferably, whether that's broadcast, whether that's satellite, wireless, mobile, fiber optic. And it's appropriate that Alpheus would get to close and AT&T started this morning because, you know, we are the Avis of Texas wholesale broadband communications. We're number 2, and we're proud to be. And number 2 by some distance, I think, but we're glad to be number 2 and to be a competitive network in this state. I think the value of this conference, before I dive into the few policy points I want to make, is that digital infrastructure finally gets some respect as an economic development issue. You know, social justice, yes, got all that. But, you know, there are a lot of people when they find out that there is a fully integrated deep metro footprint of competitive fiber, not a one-off network, not something that the cable company does on the side, but a for real carrier quality 5 nines of reliability fiber optic network, they say, wow, that's a huge competitive advantage for Texas. And, you know, we probably have not done a good enough job in telling our story. You know, we're also the home state of AT&T, so we get drowned out a little bit. But digital infrastructure is a big, big deal for economic development. As you know, it brings people into the workforce. I mean, all the points that have been made today, just I'll adopt all of that. And then let me dive in. The paradigm that I think most people speak to are content and distribution. You know, and I confess that I come from a media background, so those are media terms, and that's the way I think about it. If you're a telecom person, you talk about products and network. You know, if you're an IT person, you talk about applications or LANs or WANs or SANs. But you have something to transport, and then you have something to transport it over. And so let's just universally call those two things content and distribution. They want each other in an unhealthy way. You know, there is always a struggle between content and distribution, and whether it's CBS, whether it's Disney, CBS, whether it's Time Warner, AOL, you know, they want each other. And again, it's not a healthy thing. You know, it's a vertical integration of forms. But, you know, when Brett was on the PUC, you know, they did the deregulation of wires and generation as part of the deregulation scheme for electricity here in Texas. You know, you can split that out pretty well. Here in Houston, we've got a lot of natural gas pipelines and gas pipeline operators. It's easy to tear up your pipelines, separate your distribution from your content. You got a gathering system. You know, that's all a fiber optic network is a two-way gathering system that doesn't blow up. You have to learn how to explain things in Houston, and that's how we explain what we do. But the point is content and distribution in many industries, whether it's trucking, whether it's shipping, whether it's telecom, whether it's energy, whether it's gas gathering, you know, those two things, the primary policy choice is, are you going to allow them to marry? And almost always the answer is no, it's a bad idea. Now, we do allow it to happen in this state, in this country, because of the political might of the people involved. There's, we have the tools in antitrust law. We don't need any new laws to do this. We don't even need the 96 Act anymore because we largely ignore it and don't enforce it. If we would just be active in plain old-fashioned bundling concepts. But, 2 days ago, the Justice Department said that Sirius and XM weren't competitors. So, don't have any big high hopes about any revival of antitrust law in this country, but we don't need new legislation. We have the functional concepts. We just refuse to apply them because of the political might of the people involved. But it's almost always a good idea to separate these things because it stimulates innovation. Think about the obvious niches in the internet and who won. Craigslist, Amazon, eBay, YouTube, keep going. You fill in the blanks for me. Travelocity. Those niches weren't unobvious. Networks owners saw them and they tried to serve those niches, but they lost because they created a walled garden. They didn't give consumers what they wanted. So I don't really use the term network neutrality because people have bastardized the term. Nobody really even knows what they mean when they say that anymore. I know what I mean, and what I mean is structural separation. Structural separation is not politically accomplishable in the telecom world for a lot of reasons. So, we've done structural separation in electricity. We have it to some degree in gas pipelines. It works well. It's not going to happen in telecom for a lot of reasons. So you have to step back and say, all right, what's the second best? And incidentally, as I think most of you know, Europe has done a pretty good job of enforcing structural separation. they allow content and applications and network to live in the same companies, but they say, hey, buddy. And the 96 Act was a temporary, it was a temporary effort to do some structural separation by a regulatory edict in this country, and it worked for a little while, and it's fine, and companies like mine benefited from the opportunity, but that window has closed by and large. So in Europe, they do a pretty good job with structural separation. They say if you own network, you're going to have some tariffed wholesale access that makes sense such that other content owners can reach consumers, and consumers can reach back the other way in a two-way environment. So you have to say, all right, structural separation, it ain't happening. It's not happening. The might of AT&T and Verizon in Washington and Austin is hard to exaggerate. It's just not going to happen. And so you have to say, what's the second best opportunity? The second best opportunity really is create some legal structures such that there are market forces that act on these combined companies to actually bifurcate their content in their distribution. A good example, if you're from Houston, MLPs, Master Limited Partnerships, were born here, and they are available. They're a wrinkle in the tax code such that you can take, high capital cost utility type businesses that with low but predictable rates of return, and you can put them in a publicly traded partnership, and you have a mandate to pay out certain dividends, but they're tax advantaged. Some of it is return of capital. In other words, there's a market opportunity to pull some of your business away. And again, all these people that run pipelines and E&P companies put their pipelines in the MLP because it's a tax advantage structure. It creates value for your shareholders. Well, if we're going to allow, coal and natural gas and methane and propane and any natural gas distribution system to exist in an MLP, it doesn't really cost the Treasury very much to open that and say, we're going to do that for digital distribution systems as well. It would be a very healthy thing. It would create wealth for taxpayers, and it would create income for investors. But it would also give a market opportunity to accomplish structural separation. So to just open the MLP qualified income, to open that definition to telecom networks and not just gas networks or coal networks or propane networks, I think would be a very healthy step in the right direction from a policy point of view. The other point I want to make, and again I will close with it because I know that y'all have been here all day long, is it's still all about access. We have at Alpheus what we call the last mile toolkit, and there is no situation where every last mile solution is going to be the right one. Sometimes it's a licensed wireless shot. We can do up to 100 megs of Ethernet over microwave. we do that. Sometimes it's build fiber. They want to buy enough bandwidth to where we can justify it, and our network is close enough by, so the lateral only costs us $150,000 and we can afford it. Sometimes we're built into 122 Bell Central offices, most of the Metro Central offices, where we have the right to buy loops. We buy 4-wire digital loops. We sell T1s. We can do dry copper with CPE or customer premise equipment on the end, and we can do a mid-band Ethernet product over copper, which is a pretty neat trick. The point is, there is no solution where there is a single access technology that recommends itself, both in terms of use and economics. So everybody's got to have access to a lot of different ways to deliver their product from the backbone, and there is no scarcity at the backbone. There's plenty of people that have long-haul fiber. Again, there's plenty of people that have metro fiber. They just don't have as much of it, fortunately, as we do. But many times, it's the opportunity to reach that last customer that makes the economic difference. I can give you a quick example. National Oil Well wants to tie 5 of their facilities in Houston together in a gigabit Ethernet ring. Let's say I got 4 of them on net. I'm already built into the data center or wherever they happen to be. That 5th one, I got to go spend $150,000 to build a fiber lateral to them. Let me tell you, kids, AT&T has all 5 on net, and that's how they win that game every single time, because I have to apply some capital cost and I have to recover that capital, blah, blah, blah. So, access is the secret sauce. And so from a policy, from a regulatory point of view, you must maintain some sort of tariffed, affordable wholesale access to the loop. The loop being the piece from the central office or from the legacy telecom infrastructure out to the customer. So if we're not going to be able to do structural separation, and we're not, the big things are maybe create a little wrinkle in the tax code that gives people the incentive to do the right thing for other reasons, and protect the loop, always an access device. And again, the games get played in this world. There is no tariffed access to Ethernet loops anymore. And the whole world wants to go Ethernet. Obviously, if you've been sitting here all day, you know that. And so, access. And it's not that we or any other competitive network or competitive provider wants to use Bell infrastructure every time, but sometimes that's the only way. 91% of the business of the office buildings in America have less than 2 fiber providers. That means 1 or 0. So to say that, oh, well, we've got this duopoly in my neighborhood. I got a cable company that wants to do my phone. I got a phone that wants to do my video. We must be at this competitive point. Well, duopoly never creates price competition. I'm not an economist, but, I've lived through some things. So, everybody needs to be careful about saying when we've achieved competition, because it's going to be that marginal loop on the 4th facility that needs to be included in that gigabit Ethernet loop that stifles competition, that stifles the competitive network, that stifles the whole concept of net neutrality and somebody creative in a garage that's got something new, better, and different, and they want to get it to their customer. So again, there's no time for questions, I'm sure, but this has been an honor to address this group. And I appreciate the Baker School and Rice for allowing me to come. Thanks so much.